It's a new year, and most of the big holiday sales are now behind us. Still, there are plenty of deals going on year-round. So here's one for you. The Amazon Fire TV edition of the TCL Q5, known as the TCL Q550F QLED. But wait, we already reviewed the TCL Q5, but that one was the Q550G, which uses Google TV instead of Fire TV. How does the Q550F compare? Well, if you guess they're similar, you're right. But if you're thinking they're identical outside of the SmartOS, then you're still right. Mostly. But not exactly. Close enough. There are some minor differences, and I, Abby from Ratings.com, am about to tell you what they are. Let's start with the good news, the TV's contrast. No, this TV doesn't have local dimming or nearly perfect blacks, but its native contrast ratio is impressively high. This means that if no bright highlights are in the scene, the TV's blacks look deep. Of course, the moment a bright highlight appears, the blacks look raised, and everything looks blue or gray. But hey, not bad for a TV at this price point. And of course, no local dimming means no blooming and no lighting zone transitions. The usual, you know. Let's keep on with more good news. This budget TV's HDR Brightness is alright. Without local dimming, it can't emphasize highlights, and darker scenes look a bit washed out. But the TV still reaches peaks of 400 nits in HDR, which is decent. It also doesn't lose any of its brightness in game mode. We love it. This TV's HDR brightness performance doesn't come at the cost of accuracy either, which is nice. Near blacks are raised, as is typical with most LEDs, but afterwards, most midtones are a bit too dim until we get to the TV's peak brightness, which is a tad too bright. But listen, this is nitpicking. This TV is very accurate in HDR. For colors, the good news keeps on going. This TV's color gamut is very good. Yeah, colors aren't very accurate, as there are noticeable color mapping issues throughout, and most colors are undersaturated, but it does almost cover the entirety of the DCI-P3 color space, meaning the TV looks colorful in most content. Sometimes that's all you need, right? It's also adequate in the Rec 2020 color space, although here colors are even more undersaturated. Overall though, it's a solid performance for this budget model. It does falter a little on color volume. That's because the TV simply isn't bright enough to really display bright saturated colors. And its contrast isn't deep enough to display darker colors well. It's still decent, but it's not the most vibrant experience you'll ever have. If you like to watch a lot of SDR content, then this TV will do just fine. While you'll want to turn off a few lights in very bright rooms, it's certainly bright enough to pop in moderately lit contexts, especially with its good reflection handling. Yeah, this TV does many things well, doesn't it? Still, you'll want to avoid placing the TV directly opposite of lights or windows, as its reflection handling has a much harder time dealing with these when compared to indirect sources of light. So place the TV accordingly, and it'll do just fine. Alright, we can't just be positive, as this TV definitely has some flaws. Case in point, viewing angle. This isn't rare for an LED TV, especially one with a VA panel, as they really don't excel here. The TV's black levels in gamma start shifting noticeably as early as 11 to 13 degrees, with more prominent color and brightness shifts occurring at around 25 degrees. You really need to sit right in front of this TV if you're looking for the best possible image quality. Its out-of-the-box color accuracy is fine. It's accurate enough for most people, with colors looking mostly as they should, and most people will never think otherwise. If you're a purist, you can calibrate this TV for sure, but at this price point, hard to say if it's worth it. If you already know that accuracy really matters to you, perhaps shop for another TV. But just remember that accuracy is panel dependent, and someone else buying the exact same TV might have a more accurate one, or a less accurate one. If you're shopping for a gaming TV, do yourself a favor. Buy a bigger model than 50 inches. That's because the 55, 65, 75, and 85-inch models all have TCL's Game Accelerator 120, which lets you game at 120 Hz in 1080p and 1440p with a wide VRR range. Unfortunately, Xbox consoles can only do HDR at 4K, so you'll have to choose between either 4K at 60 Hz with HDR or 1440p at 120 Hz without HDR. Not ideal, but for everyone else, it's a great feature. Otherwise, the TV's response time is good. There's a bit of motion blur, and like many LEDs, the TV struggles when coming out of a dark state, but it's fine. You'll generally be happy with its performance here. And when it comes to input lag, blazing fast. happy gaming. So far, we've been pretty positive about this TV. Hey, what's not to love about getting a decent product for a cheap price, right? Sadly, we can't quite be as positive about this TV's image processing. It's not great. Some of it is acceptable, such as the TV's HDR native gradient handling, and even its upscaling, which doesn't do much, but we've seen worse. Its low-quality content smoothing, though, it doesn't seem to do anything, as there's still a significant amount of macro blocking left when watching low bitrate content. It's not a huge deal on a TV this cheap, and most people aren't likely to care about image processing, especially at this price point, but keep it in mind when shopping. So, should you buy the TCL Q550F? Perhaps, but before jumping in, you should consider this TV's twin, the TCL Q550G, as it outperforms the Q550F in many ways, if only barely so. The Google TV variant is a tad brighter in HDR and SDR, has slightly better image processing, and has a wider, if only barely, color gamut. It also has a wider viewing angle, although it's still bad. Also, while the operating system is a matter of preference, Google TV is snappier on this TV than Fire TV is. Apps open a bit faster, for example. In turn, the Q550F is the more accurate of the two TVs in SDR, and has better reflection handling, and its contrast is also a bit better. The Q550F also passes through advanced DTS audio formats through eARC, while the Q550G doesn't. It's extremely close. And if you know you prefer one smart OS over another, Fire TV or Google TV, then go for that model. But anyone else should probably opt for the Google TV model. As for alternatives, there are a lot of models at the budget end of the market, and the TCL Q5 is actually one of the better buys there if you're looking for something that's cheap. Still, this TV has a problem, and it's called the Hisense U6N. Yes, the Hisense is a bit more expensive, but it's also significantly better. The Hisense has local dimming, giving it vastly better contrast than the Q5. Sure, it's not technically brighter, at least not in HDR, but it sure can emphasize highlights way better than the TCL could ever hope to. Thank you, local dimming. The Hisense also outperforms the TCL in other key ways, such as having a faster response time and better image processing. The Hisense is definitely the buy here if you can afford it. But if not, the Q5 is not a bad choice. That's it for our coverage of the TCL Q550F. What do you think? Are you a Fire TV or Google TV person? Does it even matter to you? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that down in the comments section. Until next time, I'm Abby from Ratings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs. Thumbnail.
Thumbnail.
Thumbnail. We love it.
It's
Shrug.
actually surprisingly
good.
Impressed?
Ooh, it's good. Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Maybe a chin.
Thinky. First thing.